The courtroom smelled like dust and old paper, and Maren could barely hear herself think as she bounced her 6-month-old son on her lap, trying to hush the soft whimpers rising from his throat. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a sterile glow over everything. The judge's bench, the peeling paint, the opposing counsel who hadn't once looked her in the eye. Maren's hands shook slightly as she gripped the frayed strap of her diaper bag, the other arm wrapped tightly around Milo, whose cheeks were flushed and sticky with tears. She hadn't meant to bring him today. She'd called every friend, every neighbor, but no one could help. So she walked 6 blocks with Milo strapped to her chest, stood in line for 40 minutes with a bottle of formula in one pocket and her eviction notice in the other. And now she sat alone at the defendant's table, not as a criminal, but as a mother accused of disturbing the peace in her own apartment building because Milo had cried through the night for weeks. Her landlord, Mr. Halbridge, sat smirking 3 rows back, arms folded, flanked by his lawyer, who had already submitted 3 complaints and a printed-out statement from other tenants claiming she was mentally unfit to care for a child. Maren stared down at the floor to steady herself, the thrum of anxiety pounding in her ears. She had no legal representation, no one to speak on her behalf. Just a stack of wrinkled letters from social workers who'd visited once or twice, and a rent ledger that proved she was only ever late when she'd had to buy Milo formula. Her chest tightened when the clerk called the case. As she rose, Milo let out a sharp, wailing cry, the kind that shatters a room, slices through pretense, the cry of a baby who doesn't understand judgment or cruelty, only that something isn't right. Maren panicked. She tried rocking him, murmuring, "Shh, baby, mama's got you." But his cry only grew louder, urgent, like he could sense the weight pressing down on her. The bailiff glanced sideways, annoyed. The lawyer cleared his throat, preparing his notes. The judge, a silver-haired man with tired eyes named Harold Wexler, blinked once, then leaned slightly forward, as if Milo's cry had struck some chord long buried beneath years of legal drudgery. Maren opened her mouth to apologize, to beg for time, but Judge Wexler held up a hand. "Let him cry," he said softly, his voice cutting through the murmurs. The room stilled. Milo's sobs echoed off the wooden panels like a protest against the injustice of the moment. The judge looked straight at Maren, not with pity, but with something older, deeper, a memory perhaps. "Ms. Delaney," he said gently, "you may remain seated if you wish. I understand this is not ideal." Maren's mouth trembled. She sat, clutching Milo close, tears pricking her eyes not from shame, but from the sudden, bewildering kindness. The opposing lawyer objected, muttering something about courtroom decorum, but Judge Wexler shut it down with a single look. "I've heard louder things in this courtroom than a hungry baby," he said. Then, almost imperceptibly, his voice softened even further. "Years ago I was raised by a woman just like you. Alone, no support. The only thing louder than her silence was my crying." A hush fell. Maren blinked. For a moment it was like the courtroom disappeared. The stained carpets, the files, the tension, they all faded, replaced by the trembling realization that maybe someone, somewhere in power, still had a heart. Milo's cries slowed, then softened into hiccups, then a sleepy sigh as he collapsed against her chest. Maren kissed the top of his head, overwhelmed. She hadn't won anything, not yet, but something had shifted. She wasn't invisible anymore. And neither was her son. Maren lingered outside the courtroom for a long moment after the session ended, her heart still racing from the unexpected softness in Judge Wexler's eyes. The case had been postponed 2 weeks, giving her time to prepare a defense or find counsel, though the judge had made it clear, "This court does not exist to punish the exhausted." That line alone had stuck to her ribs like a meal after hunger. But even as she stepped into the narrow hallway, the whispers began. "That's her," someone muttered from behind a stack of manila folders. "The one with the screaming kid?" Maren didn't flinch. She'd heard worse. But as she rocked Milo in her arms, her mind spun with panic. Where was she going to go? The eviction notice gave her 5 days. 5! And it wasn't just the roof. It was everything. The crib her neighbor had found at a garage sale, the milk stains in the carpet, the photograph on the fridge of Milo's first smile. She couldn't carry all of that on her back. And yet, what choice did she have? Her feet moved on instinct, down the echoing hall, past rows of dull government doors until she reached the exit. A hand touched her shoulder. She turned sharply, protective. It was a woman, about her age, maybe a little younger. Well-dressed but not fancy, messenger bag across her chest, tired kindness in her expression. "Hey," she said gently. "I was inside. Heard everything. You held up strong." Maren blinked, unsure how to respond. The woman offered a business card. "Legal Aid Network. I volunteer. It's not perfect, but it's free." Maren took it, hand trembling, afraid to hope. "Thank you," she whispered. "Seriously," the woman said. "Call me tomorrow. Don't try to carry this alone." And then she disappeared into the building. Milo stirred in Maren's arms, and she kissed his forehead again. Maybe today hadn't been about winning. Maybe it was just about being seen. Still, night came fast. By 6 p.m. she was back at the apartment, her neighbor Cynthia watching from the stoop, puffing a cigarette with her hair up in a scarf. "You okay, sugar?" Cynthia asked. Maren nodded without meaning it. "We'll figure something out," Cynthia said. "If you gotta sleep on my couch, that's fine. Just say the word." Maren felt her throat tighten. "Thanks," she said. She climbed the stairs, creaking under her steps, and entered the tiny apartment. The baby bottles were still drying on the rack. The room smelled like lavender from an old candle. She laid Milo down gently on the futon and sank beside him. But before she could catch her breath, there was a knock. Sharp, deliberate. She froze. Not the landlord, not yet. He always used the key and barged in like he owned the air. She opened the door and found a man in a suit. Younger than expected. Tan skin, sharp jaw, eyes that had seen things. "Are you Maren Delaney?" he asked. "Yes," she replied cautiously. "I'm with Whitmore Holdings," he said. "My boss asked me to deliver this." He handed her a sealed white envelope, crisp and heavy like it carried importance. "What is it?" she asked, confused. "He said you'd know." The man tipped his hat, a gesture that felt like something out of another era, and turned down the hall without another word. Maren stared at the envelope. Her fingers trembled as she opened it. Inside was a single sheet of thick paper. No letterhead, just a typed note that read, "I know what it's like to be abandoned. Let me help." And beneath it, a cashier's check for $50,000. Maren nearly dropped it. Her legs buckled and she slid to the floor, Milo murmuring in his sleep as if reacting to her shock. Her breath came in small gasps, her heart thudding in her ears. Who? Why? She'd never met anyone from Whitmore Holdings. She had no rich relatives. No one knew her story, unless someone in that courtroom did more than listen. She held the check like it might disappear, her mind racing between fear, gratitude, suspicion. Was it real? Was it a trap? But her instinct, mother's instinct, told her it was real. Someone had heard Milo cry, had seen her stand alone, and instead of pity, had offered dignity. She clutched the envelope to her chest, and for the first time in months, she whispered words she didn't think she still had. Thank you. Maren didn't sleep that night. She sat on the couch with the check resting on the coffee table like it might explode. The envelope was back in her hands, turned over, reread, studied. That single line, "I know what it's like to be abandoned," looped in her mind like a prayer or a warning. By sunrise, she had memorized the check's issuing bank and Googled the watermark to make sure it was authentic. It was. Cynthia came by in the morning with black coffee and a blueberry muffin, and Maren hesitated only a second before showing her the check. "You won the damn lottery," Cynthia breathed, staring. "Number someone gave it to me," Maren said quietly. "I didn't ask," Cynthia raised an eyebrow. "And that's what's scaring you." Maren didn't answer. But Cynthia was right. It wasn't the money. It was the mystery. By 10 a.m., Maren called the number on the business card from the courthouse. The same woman from yesterday picked up. Her name was Nora, and within the hour, they were seated across from each other in the back booth of a diner with cracked red vinyl seats. "He said he was from Whitmore Holdings?" Nora asked, sipping coffee. Maren nodded. "I tried to look it up. It's a real company, right?" "Very real," Nora said. "They own nearly half the real estate between here and Cedar Falls. Old money. Very private." "And you've never heard of them doing something like this?" "No," Nora said honestly. "But I've also never seen a judge pause a court hearing because a baby cried." Maren looked down at her coffee. "So what do I do? Cash it? Give it back?" Nora hesitated, then pulled out a legal pad. "There's a way to set up a trust. Keep the money safe while you figure it out. Would you feel better about that?" Maren nodded slowly. "And is it even legal?" "He didn't ask you to do anything. No strings, no contracts. Sometimes people with too much money get strange ideas about generosity. Doesn't mean it's illegal." Maren thought about that all day. About how someone might watch a courtroom and feel something strong enough to act. And by late afternoon, she'd decided. She took a bus downtown and walked into the bank, holding her breath the whole way. The clerk confirmed the check was valid. The funds were placed into a temporary account, just like Nora suggested. No fanfare, no parade, just quiet dignity. That night, she bought Milo a new box of formula and picked up a used crib from a listing someone had posted online. When she brought it home, Cynthia helped her assemble it, humming an old blues tune under her breath. "So," Cynthia said, dusting off her hands, "you gonna try to find out who he is?" "I think I have to," Maren said. "He didn't leave a name." "Then maybe he wants to stay invisible." "Maybe," Maren said. "But no one gives $50,000 to a stranger unless it meant something." She opened her laptop, stared at the search bar, and typed, "Whitmore Holdings Board of Directors." A list popped up. Photos, bios, links. And then she saw him. Last on the page. Aidan Whitmore, age 37, youngest son of the Whitmore family, former combat medic, now vice president of acquisitions. His face was the same one she vaguely remembered from the hallway. A face shaped by loss, not privilege. She clicked on a news article. It was from 3 years ago. Aidan Whitmore donates $2 million to Veteran Families Fund after wife's death. The photo showed him with a woman, petite, dark-haired, with a soft smile. The article said she died giving birth to their child, and the child had not survived. Maren stared at the screen until her vision blurred. Suddenly, the message in the envelope wasn't just a gesture. It was a connection. Not pity, recognition, abandonment, yes, but shared. She shut the laptop slowly and went to Milo's crib, brushing his tiny fingers as he slept. "Someone saw you," she whispered. "And maybe he saw himself, too." Then, just past midnight, her phone buzzed. A new email. No sender. Just a subject line. "You looked brave in court today." Marin's heart pounded as she opened it. Inside, a single sentence. If you ever want to talk, reply to this address. No name, no request, just an invitation. She read it twice, then closed her eyes, unsure if her tears were fear, hope, or something deeper. For the first time in months, her story wasn't being written alone. Marin didn't reply to the email for 3 days. She read it every morning, then again at night. It wasn't fear that stopped her. It was the weight of possibility. What if he didn't mean it? What if it was a fluke, a favor done in a moment of weakness? But on the 4th day, after she watched Milo try to roll over and giggle at his own clumsy success, she opened her laptop and wrote just one sentence. Thank you. I don't know what to say, but I'd like to talk. She hovered over the send button for a full minute. Then she clicked. The reply came hours later, as she was folding laundry. Would tomorrow afternoon work? I can meet you wherever you feel safe. Marin's fingers trembled as she typed back. They agreed on a coffee shop near the river, a quiet place full of natural light, with wide windows and no judgment. The next afternoon she arrived 15 minutes early, her hair still damp from a rushed shower, wearing the one decent dress she hadn't sold after the divorce. She chose a table in the corner, facing the door, hands tucked into her lap. When he walked in, it was like the room changed temperature. Aidan Whitmore wore a navy wool coat, the kind that probably cost more than her rent, but he looked far from untouchable. He looked tired and deeply human. Their eyes met, and he gave her a nod before walking over. Hi, Marin. Hi. She gestured to the seat across from her. Thanks for coming. Thanks for answering, he said, sitting down. There was a long moment of silence. Neither reached for the menu. I didn't know what to say, she confessed. Honestly, I still don't. That makes 2 of us. He smiled gently, then grew serious. Your son, he reminded me of someone, of what I lost. That sound he made in court, I don't know how to explain it, but it cracked something open. Your wife, Marin said softly. I saw the article. Aidan nodded. Eleanor. She died in childbirth. Our son didn't make it either. That day in court was the anniversary. I'd just come from the cemetery. Marin's throat closed. I'm so sorry. I don't need sympathy, he said gently, but I needed to do something. Your strength, the way you stood there, even shaking. I just wanted you to know someone saw it. I wasn't strong, she whispered. I was desperate. Sometimes those are the same thing. The words sat between them like warmth. They ordered coffee, talked more, about nothing and everything. Parenthood, loss, loneliness, the brutal quiet of healing. She found herself laughing once. He noticed. I'm glad you reached out, he said finally. So am I. She hesitated. But I need to ask, why me? There are hundreds of people in pain. You could have helped anyone. I don't know, Aidan admitted. I guess something in your face reminded me of something I needed to believe still existed. Hope. Or fight. Marin swallowed hard. The air felt thick. And now I'd like to help, not just with money, if you'll let me. Help how? Milo deserves everything. So do you. I run a foundation. We support single mothers going through legal hardship. You'd be perfect on the outreach side. Paid. Flexible hours. Marin blinked. You want me to work for you? Only if you want to. She didn't answer right away. She looked out the window, at the people rushing by, at the sun starting to stretch its golden arms across the pavement. Then she looked at him. Yes, I want to. His eyes softened. Then we'll start with coffee and figure out the rest. They walked out of the cafe together. As they parted, he paused. Marin? Yeah. He's beautiful. Your son. She smiled, suddenly shy. He saved me. Aiden nodded once. Maybe he saved both of us. That night she told Milo a story she made up on the spot, about a brave little bear and a lonely fox who found each other in the middle of a frozen forest, and how together they made it through the cold. As Milo drifted off in his new crib, Maren opened her laptop and began typing a proposal draft for the foundation. But more than that, she was writing the first words of a new chapter in her life, one where strength came not from never falling, but from choosing, again and again, to stand back up. The foundation's office was nothing like Maren had imagined. Tucked between an old theater and a florist shop, it had no marble floors or high-tech glass panels, just warm walls painted in soft tones, children's drawings taped to doors, and the quiet hum of hope trying its best. When Aiden introduced her to the team, he didn't call her a case. He called her our new voice of experience, and the way they welcomed her, like she was a colleague, not a charity, made something inside her settle. She started small, a few hours a week, listening in on calls, reading through old outreach letters, helping reorganize intake forms. But it wasn't the paperwork that got to her. It was the stories. A mother who'd fled an abusive boyfriend with nothing but a baby carrier and one bottle. A grandmother raising 3 grandkids while working nights at a diner. A woman fresh out of prison, terrified to speak in her own defense because she'd been silenced so long. Every voice felt like a mirror. And every time Maren picked up the phone to call one of them back, she found herself saying things she didn't even know she knew. You're not broken. That's not your fault. It's okay to need help. She never imagined she'd become a lifeline. But the strange part? It healed her too. One morning, Aiden dropped a folder on her desk. We're pitching a new campaign to the board, he said, eyes twinkling. And I want you to write it. Me. She blinked. A full campaign? You've lived what we're trying to say. Just write from that place. She hesitated, then opened the folder. It was blank, except for a title at the top. The strongest cry is sometimes the one no one hears. That night, after Milo fell asleep with one hand still holding her finger, she sat at the kitchen table and began to write. Not from fear, not from desperation, but from a voice that had long been buried beneath shame and silence. She wrote about the courtroom, about the hunger, the insults, the fire she thought was gone. She wrote about the moment Milo cried and someone heard. The next day, Aiden read it in silence, then looked up and said simply, "We're leading with this." The campaign launched a month later. Billboards, local news spots, a short film. It reached more women than they'd expected. The phone rang non-stop. And one afternoon, as Maren walked into the break room to grab a coffee, she heard a volunteer reading aloud from her campaign text to a young client. "You see? Someone gets it," the girl whispered. And Maren just stood there, hand on the doorframe, heart thudding. She did get it. All of it. Later that evening, she found a small package on her desk. No note. Inside was a framed photo, a still from the film's final scene. A mother holding her child in a courtroom, back straight, tears falling, but eyes defiant. Behind her, a man at the bench, not a judge, but a witness to strength. She stared at it for a long time. It wasn't just a film. It was her life, retold without shame. She looked around the office, at the people filing papers, answering calls, making things move, and realized something stunning. She wasn't a guest in this world anymore. She was part of it, a builder, a voice, a home for others still trying to find their own. And maybe, just maybe, she'd started to believe what she'd told so many others, that survival was not the end of the story. It was the beginning. The city conference room was packed. an event organized by the foundation to honor women who had turned their pain into purpose. Maren wasn't expecting to be on stage, let alone speak, but Aiden had insisted. "You're the heart of this, Maren," he'd said. "They need to hear from someone who lived it." She'd worn a simple navy dress, nothing flashy, but her hands trembled the whole ride over. Milo was with her, dressed in a tiny bow tie he'd insisted on wearing. "You're gonna talk like a hero, Mama," he whispered before she walked up. That alone gave her the strength. Her speech wasn't rehearsed. It came straight from the marrow. She spoke of cold courtrooms, empty shelves, the ache of selling the last toy, and the day a stranger handed her a future instead of a verdict. The crowd was silent, then thundered. But it was what happened after that left her breathless. As she stepped off the stage, navigating hugs and handshakes, a familiar voice froze her mid-step. "Maren?" She turned slowly. At the edge of the crowd stood a woman in a deep burgundy coat, hair grayer than she remembered, but the same proud tilt of the chin, the same ice in the gaze. It was Evelyn, her ex-husband's mother, Milo's grandmother. Maren's breath caught. She hadn't seen her since the divorce, since the morning Evelyn had told her, "You're not good enough for my son or his child." Maren's heart raced. But Evelyn stepped forward and hugged her. It wasn't long or emotional, but it was real. When she stepped back, her voice wavered. "I saw the film. The courtroom. I knew it was you." Maren didn't know what to say. "Why are you here?" Evelyn's eyes found Milo, now playing with paper ribbons in a corner. "To meet him," she said simply, "if you'll allow it." Maren couldn't speak. Her years with Jacob had taught her to steel herself for cruelty, not grace. "He's his own person," Maren managed, her voice tight. "You'd have to ask him." Evelyn nodded. "Fair." She pulled something from her purse, an envelope. For a second, Maren's body tensed, remembering another envelope, another stranger. But this was different. "It's a trust," Evelyn explained. "Something I started for Jacob's son. I didn't believe you would keep him, raise him, protect him." Her voice cracked. "I was wrong." Maren stared at it. "Why now?" Evelyn swallowed. "Because I've watched too many things from the sidelines. I want to do one thing right." She looked at her again. "You did what my son never could. You stayed. You fought." A pause. "You became everything I wanted for him, and more." And with that, Evelyn quietly stepped away, giving Maren space. That night, Maren lay awake, staring at the ceiling while Milo slept on her arm. The envelope remained unopened on the kitchen table. Not because she feared what was inside, but because for the first time, she wasn't desperate for it. She wasn't scraping. She wasn't begging. She wasn't at the mercy of other people's decisions. She had power now. She had choice. She could say yes or not yet. She could protect her son on her terms, and that, more than any check or apology, was the justice she'd longed for. Maren rose, walked to the table, and opened the envelope. Inside, along with the trust papers, was a short note in Evelyn's script. "You raised him in love. I hope I can learn from that." Maren folded the paper quietly and placed it in the drawer beside the toy she'd once sold, now returned and repaired. Some things came full circle. Some people, too. The article dropped on a quiet Monday morning. Maren had just returned from taking Milo to school when her phone buzzed non-stop. Texts from acquaintances, messages from strangers, social media blowing up. Aiden had told her a feature might be coming, but she hadn't expected this. The headline read, "Mother, Fighter, Rebuilder, How One Woman's Quiet Strength Changed Everything," with a photo of her holding Milo's hand as he held his restored teddy bear. The piece had gone viral, picked up by several outlets, shared across parenting forums, disability advocacy pages, even business sites praising the ethics of the buyer who returned with a hand, not just a wallet. But as she scrolled, Marin's fingers froze. The byline. The photographer credited was J. Forrester. Jacob, her ex-husband. The man who had walked away on their anniversary, left her crying in a clinic hallway with a useless leg and no explanation. Her stomach knotted. Could it be? There were thousands of Forresters, but the timing, the angle of the photo, the one of Milo with the sun behind him, it was his style. Marin paced. She hadn't seen him in nearly 4 years, and now, quietly, subtly, he was back, pointing a lens at the life he once discarded. That afternoon, after picking Milo up, she visited Aiden at the foundation office, asking directly, "Who took the cover photo?" Aiden hesitated. "I didn't want to stir anything. But yeah, it was him." Marin blinked. "Why?" "He showed up last month," Aiden admitted. "Said he'd heard about you through some shared media circles. He asked if he could document quietly. He promised he wouldn't disturb you or Milo." "And you let him?" she said, voice trembling. "I did," Aiden nodded. "Because I thought maybe you deserved your story, seen through the eyes of someone who once missed it." Marin didn't know whether to feel betrayed or curious. She sat down slowly. "Did he say anything else?" "Only that he wasn't the same man anymore." That night, she flipped through the article again. Each photo was delicate, never invasive, never exploitative. He had captured moments she hadn't noticed. Her holding Milo's backpack on her knee as he tied his shoes, her laughing mid-spoonful at dinner with other foundation mothers. Milo curled beside her, hand on her belly where his little sister now grew. Jacob had seen it all. Without a word, he had witnessed the world she rebuilt. Every scar, every tenderness, every triumph. And instead of inserting himself, he had offered something rare. Understanding. No contact, no apology letter. Just a quiet reverence. Marin closed her laptop. The past would never be clean. But she had not just survived it. She had risen beyond it. Jacob had chosen the only path he could. Not a second chance, not a grand gesture, but truth. Captured. Published. Left at her feet. It was Parent Community Day at Milo's school, the kind of event Marin usually avoided. Not out of fear, but out of weariness. Small talk drained her, and being the inspiring single mom with a prosthetic leg often meant she was either pitied or paraded. But Milo had begged her to come this time, and when a child like Milo begged, with eyes that still believed the world was fair, a mother shows up. She wore a soft maroon dress that hugged her comfortably, the prosthetic hidden under a flowing hem, and brought a tub of homemade muffins that Milo proudly carried into his classroom. Parents buzzed about, some remembering her from the article, others pretending not to. The principal gave a short welcome, then asked each child to introduce the guest they had brought. Milo stood nervously, clearing his throat. "This is my mom," he said, voice steady. "She's the strongest person I know. And she once sold my teddy to feed me, but someone kind helped us. And now, we help others." A hush settled over the room. One mother dabbed at her eyes. The teacher smiled warmly. Then the principal stepped forward and added, "And that's not all. Today we have a surprise." She pointed to the projector screen behind her. Milo's mom was featured last month in a national story. Many of you may have read it, but today we want to celebrate her right here. The screen flickered on, displaying the opening image of the article, Marin and Milo holding hands in the sun. Gasps and claps followed. Some children whispered. Marin froze. Her heart raced. She hadn't known they would do this. But before she could object or panic, Milo slid his hand into hers and whispered, They're clapping for you, Mama. Not looking at you. Just for you. She sat straighter. As the slideshow played, the teacher explained how their school was starting a donation program for struggling families. An idea inspired by Milo's story and Aiden's foundation. It was called The Hand That Came Back. Parents donated toys, clothing, and even time to volunteer. Maren wasn't just being celebrated. She was the catalyst for a ripple effect, one that would touch more lives than she'd ever imagined. Afterward, several parents approached her. A mother of twins confided, "I left an abusive marriage last year. Your story gave me courage to stop hiding." Another said, "We've got a toy truck my son won't let go of. But after today, he said he wants to give it to another kid who needs it more." For the first time in years, Maren didn't feel like a survivor or a headline. She felt like a neighbor, a woman among other women. Not carried, but standing. Contributing. Milo squeezed her hand again. "Can we bake more muffins next time?" he asked. She smiled down at him. "We'll make a whole tray." And as they left the school, the sun glinting off her prosthetic leg like a badge of earned light, Maren realized something profound. She was no longer someone rebuilding. She was someone building. With every step, every scar, and every... It was late afternoon when Maren heard the soft knock at her door. Not the urgent kind that demanded attention, but the hesitant kind that hoped for permission. She opened it to find Aiden standing there, his suit jacket draped over one arm, a paper bag of groceries in the other. "I figured I owed you dinner," he said, smiling shyly. Maren stepped aside to let him in, her heart unsure whether it should flutter or freeze. The kitchen, once a place of quiet survival, felt suddenly warm with him moving through it, sleeves rolled up, chopping onions like it was second nature. "You cook?" she asked, half teasing. "I survive," he replied. "Turns out we've got that in common." They ate simply, vegetable stew and cornbread, but every bite felt richer because of who sat across the table. Milo had long since gone to bed, leaving them with candlelight, 2 mugs of tea, and the unspoken weight of all that hadn't yet been said. Maren finally asked, "Why did you help us that day?" Aiden leaned back, staring into his cup. "Years ago, my sister sold her wedding ring to pay for my school books. No one helped her. Not one person saw her tears in the pawn shop parking lot. I vowed, if I ever saw someone like her again, I wouldn't look away." Maren blinked, stunned. "And you thought I was like her?" "No," Aiden said. "I thought you were stronger." The words landed like a hand on her back, steadying, not pushing. She swallowed hard. "The envelope, that wasn't just charity, was it?" He shook his head. "It was a bridge, one you could cross or burn. Either way, I'd still have seen you." Silence settled in again, but it wasn't awkward. It was thick with clarity. Maren realized she hadn't just been given a second chance financially. She'd been seen, truly seen, by someone who didn't want to rescue her, but to walk beside her. "Do you always hand envelopes to strangers?" she asked, smiling faintly. Aiden grinned. "Only to women holding teddy bears with more dignity than most CEOs." They laughed, really laughed. And when the laughter faded, Maren said quietly, "I kept the bear, you know." Aiden nodded. "I figured." The clock ticked toward midnight. Aiden stood to leave, pausing at the door. "There's no pressure," he said, his voice softer now. "But if ever you want, I'd like to come back, not as a helper." As a friend, Maren hesitated for a beat, then nodded. "Bring muffins next time." He chuckled, stepping into the night. She watched him go, the warmth in her chest unfamiliar, but not unwelcome. She closed the door, leaned against it, and smiled to herself. Maybe this wasn't a fairy tale. But maybe, just maybe, it was something better. Real. The next morning, Maren woke up before the sun, the air still holding a hush of possibility. She poured herself a cup of coffee and walked barefoot to Milo's room. He was still asleep, one arm flung over his pillow, the faded teddy bear tucked under his chin. She sat beside him for a moment, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead, before rising quietly and dressing for the day. It wasn't court. Not anymore. It was just a visit to a school, a grocery store, a walk past the bakery where they gave her free cookies last week. Life was ordinary again. But this time, without shame wrapping around her like barbed wire. She didn't jump when people looked at her. She didn't hide the fact that she limped when tired, or that her wrists bore the story of healing, not damage. By noon, Milo was tugging her toward the community garden, waving to Mrs. Hemsley, who always slipped him cherry tomatoes. Aiden was there already, squatting beside a row of carrots. He stood when he saw her, wiping his hands on his jeans, and said, "I figured you'd come." She raised a brow. "And why's that?" "Because I asked nothing of you," he said, "and you're the kind of woman who remembers that." She smiled. They worked side by side until the sun dropped lower in the sky, until Milo grew bored and began building mud castles near the watering hose. And as they finished planting the last basil, Maren turned to him and asked, "Do you still have that envelope?" Aiden paused, surprised. "The one I gave you?" She nodded. "No," he said. "I don't keep gifts I meant to give." She looked down, hands brushing dirt off her skirt. "Then maybe I can give something back." "Like what?" he asked, not demanding, but curious. "Time," she whispered. "Trust. A reason to believe that good things don't always end." Aiden nodded, as if he already knew. "Then let's build from that." That evening, they walked home together, not holding hands, not yet, but in step. As they reached her doorstep, she turned. "You once said I was stronger than your sister, but you were wrong." "Was I?" he asked. "Yes," she said, voice breaking. "She was strong enough to believe in you. I'm just now learning how to believe in myself." He didn't argue. He just nodded, the silence between them fuller than words. Inside, Milo was already asleep. She tucked him in, kissed his forehead, and stood at the doorway for a long time. Then she went to the drawer and took out a piece of paper, a fresh one, and wrote down a list. What I know to be true. First item, I am not forgotten. Second, Milo deserves joy. Third, not all strangers are cruel. And then at the bottom, she added a new line. The courtroom didn't see me, but one man did. And I saw myself through him. She folded the paper, tucked it into the same envelope Aiden had given her weeks ago, the one she'd kept in a box of receipts, unopened until now, and placed it in a new box labeled Beginning. As she turned off the lights and stepped onto the porch, she looked at the stars above and smiled. Her story didn't begin in that courtroom, and it didn't end there either. It began with a cry that stopped a room, but it was built, piece by piece, on every quiet act of grace that followed.